Hello, everyone. This is Lauren Steiner, and welcome to tonight's special edition of the Robust Opposition. I'm really pleased to have with me tonight as my special guest, Linda Seeley, who is the founder of, co-founder? Okay, we're going to get to exactly what she did with this in a second, but San Luis Obispo Mothers for Peace. She's been fighting the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant for years. We were supposed to have Harvey Wasserman on with us tonight, but he is unable to join the show due to technical difficulties. I'm going to go with Linda, who is a force in her own right. So Linda, welcome to the show. How are you tonight?
Thank you, Lauren. I'm very well. I'm glad to be here.
Great. Well, I'm glad you were able to get on. At our age, we have technological limitations, but you and I managed to pull it off, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, before we talk about Diablo Canyon, talk about your organization, SLO Mothers for Peace, what it is, what your role in it is, and then we can segue into Diablo Canyon.
Sure. San Luis Obispo Mothers for Peace was founded actually in 1967 in response to the Vietnam War. And then when PG&E announced that it was going to be looking to build a nuclear power plant in our county, the Women of Mothers for Peace, which was in 1973, they hardly even knew what a nuclear power plant was, but they started self-educating and became legal interveners in the process with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And what that means is that Mothers for Peace is a watchdog organization concerning matters of safety around Diablo Canyon. So I moved to California in '82, and that's when I joined Mothers for Peace. And currently I am a member of the board. I'm the vice president, and I'm one of the spokespersons.
Great. Now let's talk about the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant. I used to live down in Los Angeles, which is closer to the San Onofre nuclear power plant. And we were able to successfully shut that down almost 10 years ago due to a leak. And that leak was the impetus that we needed to set off the moment to shut it down. And the next thing was the Diablo Canyon. So why don't you give a little bit of history about that nuclear power plant and talk about the problems and the campaign that initially seemed successful, that it was going to be decommissioned in 2024 and 2025.
Okay, well, Diablo Canyon was actually delayed. The opening of Diablo Canyon was delayed for probably around 5 years or so because of all of the protests around it. And maybe some of your listeners or audience remember the protests. Diablo Canyon was, I think, the longest lasting protest in the US.
Can you give us a date here?
Yeah, starting in 1978, there was an occupation. There were many thousands of people arrested, about 4,000 people who were arrested. But finally, in '84, they did go online. Unit 1 went online. There are 2 units there. And it's been online ever since, and Mothers for Peace has been working ever since and before it started to shut it down because it's a very unsafe, like all nuclear power plants, it's unsafe. But it has the special attributes of being built, the intake structure for the cooling water for all of the cooling at Diablo Canyon is 300 yards from a major active earthquake fault called the Shoreline Fault. Then there is the famous Hosgri Fault, which is about 3 miles offshore. And there are about 13 earthquake faults there. And
talk about why an earthquake fault, like if there was an earthquake, what exactly would happen to a nuclear power plant?
well, we're not quite sure. There was a nuclear NRC, Nuclear Regulatory Commission, um, um, resident inspector, whose name was Dr. Michael Peck, who worked at Diablo Canyon for 5 years. He, when they were doing seismic studies back in 2012, he wrote, and the NRC gave PG&E a clean bill of health on these seismic studies. But Dr. Peck took issue with the NRC decision, and he wrote what's called a dissenting professional opinion, which cost him his job. And what he said was, if there were an earthquake fault, because these earthquake faults are connected, especially the shoreline fault and another fault called the Los Osos fault, that if there were an earthquake that would travel from one fault to another, which likely would happen, earthquakes don't stop at stop signs. That what, in his opinion, that the essential safety backup systems for Diablo Canyon would fail. Not that the domes would burst open or anything like that, but you got to have your backup safety systems in order to run. No nuclear power plant is safe, but in order to run it more safely. So he actually was dismissed from the job here for writing that, sent to Tennessee, filed a grievance with the NRC, and he was still fighting this grievance up until last year. And I don't know what's happened since then.
Okay, we have Harvey in the show now. I'm going to add him to the stream. Hi, Harvey.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. You want to center yourself there.
There we go.
Hi, Harvey.
Hey, Linda Seeley.
How you
What's
doing?
doing? Let's see here.
So you'll want to center yourself a little bit better. Here, I'll
mean
tell you what. I'll do it like this, and then you don't have to worry about centering yourself.
Well, you always got to try and center yourself.
All right. So Harvey Wasserman, who should need no introduction to the anti-nuke movement, but I will give him a little introduction anyway, was I would say one of the founders of the anti-nuke movement in this country. And I didn't know him, but I was active in an organization that he was the spokesperson for, the Clamshell Alliance, back in the late 70s when I was in college. And they had demonstrations in the Seabrook nuclear power plant up in Seabrook, New Hampshire, which wasn't very far from where I went to college at Wesleyan University in Middletown, Connecticut. And I was on the editorial board of the alternative newspaper, and we devoted a whole issue to the Clamshell Alliance and the protests up at Seabrook. Linda was just talking about the protests in '78 at the Diablo Canyon site that seemed to have about the same number of people, many thousands of people who got arrested. Harvey, do you want to just talk a little bit about, well, no, actually, let's talk about what happened in the 70s later, because I have a historical question that I want to ask both of you. But let's continue. We were talking about Diablo Canyon, and I wanted to talk about the campaign to shut it down, because I know you were involved in that too, Harvey, weren't you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But listen, we're celebrating this week. They shut the number 93, the Palisades reactor at Michigan. People worked on it for decades. And, let's put it this way. When we started in 1974, I was living on an organic farm in Massachusetts, not far from Wesleyan. Richard Nixon got on national television and said there'd be 1,000 nuclear reactors in the U.S. by the year 2000. And in the year 2000, there were 104. So now with the shutdown of Palisades on May 20th, we're at 92. Way too many, but never think that we didn't have an impact, because we certainly did.
Well, I want to talk about how you organized the campaign to shut down Diablo Canyon, when that started, how long it took, and what was the assurance that you got. Back to you, Linda.
It wasn't a campaign. Mothers for Peace constantly through the years, when there was a problem, we would take it to the NRC with our attorney in Washington. But what happened for the shutdown of Diablo actually was an agreement that was made among, I think it was 7 organizations: the NRDC, National Resource Defense Council, Friends of the Earth, the Alliance for Nuclear Responsibility, the Environment California, 2 unions, the IBEW and another one that I can't remember, and the governor. The governor.
And was this Governor Jerry Brown at the time?
Yes. And they negotiated Mothers for PG&E. And PG&E. That's the one I'm leaving out. PG&E would not allow Mothers for Peace to be in the negotiations. They axed us out, and we did not know the negotiations were even going on. We were meeting frequently with Friends of the Earth, but they couldn't. They were under what's it called? They had to be quiet. They couldn't talk about it.
A gag.
Gag rule, yeah. So they couldn't talk about it, but they gathered information from us, but we didn't really know what was going on. And then one day we got a call. Well, actually, in the night before the agreement was announced, we got a call from Friends of the Earth saying, this is what's going to happen. We were shocked. And we were also not very pleased with it, because we thought it was too far in the future. We were worried that some shenanigans could happen between the time, which was in 2016, 6 years ago, they signed that agreement. And then PG&E withdrew its application to renew the license of Diablo Canyon, which was in the works, by the way. They withdrew that application in June of 2018. So, but we were still concerned, because a lot can happen between back then and now, and by golly, it has happened. And so we're what can I say? Outraged, maybe?
Outraged.
I think that would be a good word.
Right.
We're devastated that Governor Newsom would be so gullible as to start believing what this nuclear industry is touting, that they are, this is a form of renewable energy, right? And that it, carbon free. It's a desperation move.
Well, let me ask you about this poll. I'm putting the poll in the comments right now, because it's in a website called Green Car Congress, which touts itself as energy, technologies, issues, and policies for sustainable mobility. And the title of this is Poll Finds Strong Local and Statewide Support for Extending Operations of California's Diablo Nuclear Power Plant. And it talks about this newly released polling from Carbon Free California, with input and support from Data for Progress, which was actually a polling firm for Bernie Sanders. It's shocking. And it's basically saying that 58% of the people polled wanted to keep it open. There was strong support. And they were saying that it would be reducing the likelihood of blackouts, saving more than $2 billion on electric bills, providing a source of electricity as the state transitions to wind and solar. I mean, it sounds like this is an AstroTurf group.
Yeah, I mean, if you pose the question in those terms, of course people are going to support it. So let's focus on what, if you don't mind, Lauren, let's focus on what it's going to take to keep these reactors from going forward. There's this mindset among the pro-nukers that you got these two beautiful black boxes. Nothing's going to happen. They're perfectly run. They're completely safe, and they're economical. None of which is true. Okay. Now there are certain slight technical problems with keeping Diablo Canyon open. Number one, as Linda has pointed out, there's not enough space on there for more nuclear waste beyond 2025. In other words, this is a closed room. And if they try and run this thing past 2025, they're going to have to put the waste in downtown San Francisco. There's nowhere to put that stuff. This is a slight practical issue. Here's more in no particular order. And Linda, please jump in and add or correct me. The cooling system at Diablo Canyon is illegal. They got a temporary permit from, I guess, the Coastal Commission.
State Lands Commission.
The what?
State Lands Commission.
So
they own the lease. They own the lease for the land that the cooling system is built on.
Right. So the problem, Lauren, slight problem, is you have a once-through cooling system where the water comes out of the ocean and goes back into the ocean many degrees hotter. And it's illegal under California law. They got an extension. So if they're going to continue to operate the plant, they're going to have to get a new extension with the California Commission that owns the land where the piping is. Small detail. Number three.
Harvey, don't forget to remind people that plant circulates 2.5 billion gallons of water through it every single day. 2.5 billion gallons of water. And every form of sea life that's in that water, all of the larvae, the plankton, the little bitty microscopic life forms are all killed. When it goes through there, it kills everything. It comes out 19 degrees hotter and dead.
Yes.
So they don't use any fresh water in this plant at all?
No, it's salt. It's all salt water. It comes through. Okay, here's another small detail. The plant, Diablo Canyon Unit 1, which is older than Unit 2, and there's some significant differences, is embrittled. It's been shown, it was in 2005, Linda, when was it tested? Embrittlement is a very,
2005.
So a mere 17 years ago is the last time they've tested it. Embrittlement is a very serious defect in a nuclear plant. What happens is that the pressure vessel that holds the nuclear reaction is stainless steel. And over time, if it's subjected to intense heat, pressure, and radiation, it loses its resilience. So that if you take this pressure vessel, and God forbid you have a meltdown, and you dump the cooling water into the pressure vessel to stop the chain reaction, the pressure vessel, if it's sufficiently embrittled, will shatter like glass, which means that the whole radioactive core will hit the water and vice versa. The whole place will blow apart. You'll have hydrogen, steam, and even fission reactions that are apocalyptic. And you will send a radioactive cloud all the way into Los Angeles and then back up to San Francisco. And it could not be worse. It is worse than a nuclear bomb. There is far more radiation released in that situation in reactors that are 30 years old than you would with a nuclear bomb. I mean, it's just a small detail there. And they have not retested Diablo Canyon Unit 1 for embrittlement for 17 years. And when they first tested it,
Because they got an exemption, remember,
right.
Harvey? They got an exemption for it because they were going to shut down. They were supposed to do it in 2017. And because they said, well, we don't need to do it. It's going to shut down.
Well, because it's going to shut down in 24. So,
Right.
and this is Unit 1, so we don't have to do it. And now they want to extend the life of Unit 1 without having inspected. One of the things we asked for, Lauren, and you were part of this actually, is we had a petition asking the governor to force an independent inspection of Diablo. We didn't even ask for it to be shut. We asked for it to be inspected. It hasn't been inspected. And people say, oh, well, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is there. Well, if you have a Dr. Michael Peck as your resident inspector, and he says that the reactors can't withstand an earthquake, and he's the NRC guy, and their response is to pack him off to Siberia, that doesn't exactly instill confidence. Okay.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. When did you first get wind that this was happening, that he was reneging on this agreement?
Well, he hasn't yet.
But does it have anything to do with the Russian invasion? Are they using that as an excuse that the price of gas is going up and we need the energy? Yes or no on that one?
I have not heard that as an excuse. What I have heard is that California needs to meet these climate goals for reducing its CO2 by 2030, I think it is, by cutting its emissions in half by 2030. And so they're running around looking for ways to cut the emissions in half. And this Diablo Canyon seems to be a convenient way to do that. Unfortunately, what happens with Diablo Canyon, first of all, I want to go back for 1 minute to the brownouts, because that's one thing they're saying, oh, we're going to have brownouts if we don't keep it. Well, guess what? We had brownouts last year, and Diablo Canyon was online. This year, they expect us to have brownouts. Diablo Canyon will be online. It's not like Diablo Canyon is keeping us from having brownouts, okay? The other part of it is that what Diablo Canyon is doing is keeping the renewables offline because of that power that's going into the grid 24/7. Well, when it's operating, it actually was down 149 days in 2020. Unit 2, I think, was down for 149 days in 2020 because of technical problems. But anyway, what happens is when the Diablo Canyon is online in the middle of the day, when we have tons and tons and tons of solar, that they can't put the solar online because they can't overload the grid. And Diablo Canyon takes up too much room on the grid to allow the renewables to come on.
Right.
Wow, that's an important point that a lot of people, I'm sure, don't know.
No.
Now,
here's another point, Lauren,
okay,
which also throws new light on the political situation, which makes it better for the green forces, is that there are more than 70,000 people in California working in the wind and solar industry. That's 70,000. And only 1,500 people are working at Diablo.
That's right.
So we're at a tipping point here where the solar industry and the wind industry and the efficiency and the batteries are actually coming to be more powerful than the nuclear industry.
Well, they're all fighting back because there's also a bill or a regulation that they're trying to get rid of the net metering. And the whole I'm sure you know about that, Harvey. The whole solar industry and all the organizations are fighting that. So it's a big assault on renewables. And what I'd like to know is, where are these organizations that got the agreement in the first place? Friends of the Earth, Environment California, NRDC. Have you spoken to them, Linda, Harvey? What are they saying about this?
We have been in touch with them. And we are waiting now that, they extended that deadline. They were PG&E was supposed to make an application for the extension by May 19th, and now they extended that application date to July 5th. So it seems as though the parties who signed the agreement are remaining mum for the moment. And we actually do not know if they're organizing a protest or if they're not a protest, sign waving protest. I mean, a protest to the violation of the legal agreement that they signed their names to, along with PG&E, and which was ratified by the legislature and also given, the go ahead by the CPUC. So it was a big deal. And we, Mothers for Peace, we are still waiting to see what the signers of the agreement are going to do.
When Lauren, it's not entirely clear that PG&E really wants to keep Diablo going.
That's right.
I mean, they were not unhappy in many ways to get Diablo shut. It is not economical. Their question really is, are they actually making any money there?
Yeah.
And in order to proceed, they would have to get a green light from the NRC, which has generally been a rubber stamp. But lately, there has been some rumblings in the NRC. They haven't really rolled over 100% for the industry. The industry itself may be ambivalent about this. Like I say, there's no space for the nuclear waste. There's also no evidence that, you got to remember that nuclear power does emit carbon.
Yeah, and every step of the way.
Every step of the way. And so this whole myth that Diablo is going to, fight carbon emissions, it's not clear. And well, it is clear they don't. It does not. So, you got to remember, Newsom has not signed off on this yet. And I believe that looking at what happened at Palisades, it's a big deal what happened at Palisades because they were scheduled to close on May 31st, and they jumped in and closed on May 20th. And this is Entergy. This is the biggest reactor operator in the country. They had to come forward and admit that they had technical problems at Palisades that would not allow them to continue to operate another 11 days. This is astounding when you think about it. So,
you mentioned that name, Entergy, and it makes me think of Obama, because Entergy was a major contributor to his campaign for president. And I ignored a lot of these neoliberal signs, because he would be the first Black president, and I really wanted to support that. But of course, as we know, Obama had this all of the above energy strategy. He quadrupled fracking, not Texas oil man George W. Bush, but Obama. And he appointed Ernest Moniz as his energy secretary, who I wrote this article, I think it was in Foreign Affairs magazine, about nuclear and also about fracking. So he was a big proponent, and they licensed the first nuclear plants in 30 years under Obama. And he was always talking about these small modular reactors and how they were so much safer. But that's not true, is it?
No.
And then, well, first, they are safer because they don't exist. As long as they continue to not exist, they'll be safer. But the one thing that we have to shift is we are no longer debating nuclear power. We are debating the physical status of the 92 reactors that are left. There's no blanket discussion about nuclear power anymore. There will never be another big reactor built in the United States. Now, they want to talk about the small ones. That's a whole other world. They're not going to have small ones to deploy in any number until the end of this decade. So in the meantime, our burden is to deal with, as was done at Palisades, with the 92 reactors now that are each their own individual issue. Now, these people who are talking about extending the life of Diablo have not inspected Diablo. There has been no independent inspection of Diablo Canyon pretty much ever because we've always relied on the NRC. And now with Dr. Peck, we understand that the NRC cannot be relied on. And the same is true with the other 90 reactors in this country. Each one of them is their own problem. So when you hear Jim Hansen or Charlie Komanoff or some other, carbon concerned individual talking about nuclear power, that issue is over. There's not going to be any more.
Well, you know what? It isn't over. I was going to save this to later in the show, but I want to bring it up now because you mentioned it. When we were first active back in the late 70s, 3 Mile Island happened. And 3 Mile Island was very scary. I had just seen the movie, The China Syndrome, which was a fictional account of a meltdown, a near meltdown at a nuclear power plant. Well, I have to tell you, after 3 Mile Island, I went back and saw that film. I was still in college at this point, took notes, and I wrote an article for that alternative newspaper I was telling you about called The China Syndrome, first the movie, now the mess. And it was like uncanny how much true to life that film was. And then, of course, we had Chernobyl, and then we had Fukushima. And I remember that Fukushima had just happened when we were trying to close down San Onofre. And we had the former prime minister come over and talk about how horrible it was. We had the former head of the NRC, Gregory Jasko, come and talk about how horrible it was. And even Barbara Boxer was in our corner. And so after that leak of the reactor, all the forces converged and we managed to get it shut down. And I remember going down to the Ritz-Carlton in Laguna Niguel where the NRC was having a hearing. And I started arguing with this 23-year-old, looked like he was in his young 20s, really tall guy who worked for the IBEW, the Electrical Workers Union. And they were all there to support the keeping the plant open. And I started to talk to him. And I'll be damned if he didn't spit on me. From how tall he was, 6, whatever, he spits right down on me. And I was so shocked. All I could sputter was, "Your mother would be so ashamed of you." I couldn't believe it, But anyway, we were successful there.
Yes,
and so
we are.
I think about what's happened in the last 10 years. And I think about Obama and his energy secretary and his all of the above energy strategy. And I think about, James Hansen talking about how we need nuclear, foremost respected climate scientist. We had this Michael Schellenberger, who I was shocked to find out is running for governor. He's
but you got to look at him.
Supremely pro-nuclear. He wrote an article that was very controversial called The Death of Environmentalism a number of years back.
Yeah.
And he was featured heavily in that film Pandora's Promise, which I remember Jack Ite from SoCal 350 and I went out and handed out leaflets outside that film because that was financed by Philip Anschutz. And it was a pro-nuclear power film, but it was meant to look like an objective documentary. But the worst thing is, really recently, probably a year ago, I'm on Facebook and I see that Jacobin magazine, which is this premier socialist magazine in our country, is actually doing a debate on nuclear power. And they legitimately had, they had one guy making like a legitimate case for it. And I wrote the editor a letter and I said, I want my $100 contribution back because I can't be supporting any publication that is going to even consider that nuclear is an option. So what I would like to know is, Harvey and Linda, what's happened in the last 45 years? You wanted to say, Harvey, it's not an issue, but I'm seeing that it is still.
No, what I'm saying is that the issue with nuclear power is no longer the big picture of nuclear power. The issue with nuclear power is each specific reactor. And Obama, of course, stuck us with the last one, which is Plant Vogtle in Georgia. He gave him $8.5 billion, $8.3 billion. Trump came in with another $3.7 billion. And the reactor has not yet opened and it's up to $30 billion. Nobody is going to build any more big reactors in this country.
And
Other
nobody will insure them. That's another thing. There's no
Yes.
private insurance company. Well, it has to be the government that insures them, which is us.
But the important thing that we as anti-nuclear, pro-green power people have to do is stop debating the nuclear issue and start talking about each specific individual reactor, because that's where the rubber meets the road. And that's what we just saw at Palisades. Nobody expected these guys to close early. Somebody must have gone in there and said, holy cow, place is going to blow up. Shut it 11 days early. It's unheard of. And that is our fight at Diablo Canyon. We are not debating nuclear power at Diablo Canyon. We're debating a reactor that is illegal, that can't store its waste, that's embrittled, that could blow up at any moment. It is not an abstract issue. Now, with the small reactors, okay, you can talk somewhat abstract, but they're completely out to lunch. And Lauren, the miracle that we face now and that we are riding, when we first started fighting nukes, I did it in 73, they came into our town to build some nukes, and we were opposed. And we didn't know much. I knew a lot about nuclear power because I did a report on it in 9th grade, which I took from Our Friend the Atom by Walt Disney. But I got the book for my bar mitzvah. But when they asked us in 1973, if you shut down nuclear power, where are you going to get the energy? And we said wind and solar. We had no idea what we were talking about. But it has been one of the greatest technological miracles in human history. If you described in 1973 the extent to which solar and wind have succeeded, you would not have been credible. So we have behind us an industry in this country that actually employs almost 800,000 people. There are more people working in wind and solar in California than there are in coal in the whole United States. Mm-hmm. So the bottom line is this. We have won the debate over big nuclear power plants. Vogtle will be the last one in America. Where we continue to win now is on each individual reactor, starting at Diablo Canyon. We do not have this guy, Michael Sheiskov. And by the way, he's been pro-nuclear, this guy, Sheiskov, I don't call him. But he's running for governor. He is a total fascist. If you look at his social policies, he hates the homeless. He hates women. He's a horrible guy. Horrible. No accident here. He's no liberal. So the bottom line is, we don't get sucked into debates over nuclear this and solar that. What are the specific realities of Diablo Canyon and Davis-Besse and North Anna and Palo Verde? That is the issue. And we will win on that at Diablo Canyon. I guarantee you there are a lot of people right now in the industry with big money who are posing to talk about keeping Diablo open, who really do not want it open. And because they can't handle it. Not because of the big nuclear issue, but because of the technical, mechanical realities of that piece of garbage out there. So, Linda and I Linda's been in this longer than I have at Diablo. I got arrested at Diablo in '84 when she just turned 20. But the reality is that it's the physical realities. I am not convinced that Newsom is going to sign off on an extension. The technical obstacles that they would have to overcome to keep Diablo operating are insane, and they don't have that much to do with the broader debate about nuclear power.
Well, Linda, what do you have planned? Okay, so we have a petition. I put the link. It's way up at the top of the comments.
Thank you.
We have over 1,000 signatures. Doesn't seem like very much. We need to get more signatures on that petition. You're also asking people to write letters to the editor. What else are you planning as far as pressure on? And you also want Jennifer Grantham, who is Biden's energy secretary, to weigh in. Have you had any response from them?
No. She is 100% pro-nuclear. Yeah. And that may be one reason that Biden chose her. We're not sure. But I want to go back to something you were talking about earlier, Lauren, which is this flip in people's attitudes toward nuclear power. And I think it's really important for people to understand a few things. A few years ago, I can't remember exactly how it happened, but we discovered that every fifth grade teacher in the state of California was being given free of charge a unit on nuclear power that was free. It was in a format where the kids could, she got enough, or he got enough for all the kids in the classes to have these little modules to learn about nuclear power. And what they started doing, and this is about 15 years ago that we discovered this, they have been teaching the kids in public schools about the virtues of nuclear power. That's
Wow.
one thing. Yeah. Great. It was a terrific idea for the nuclear industry.
Right next to safe sex.
That's right. It was a genius. Okay. Number 2, nuclear medicine. Nuclear medicine saves lives. We get our CAT scans, all these body scans, life-saving drugs when people have cancer, radiation treatments, all that. It's been normalized. People don't even really think radiation is harmful anymore. It's bizarre. I mean, people say that to me. Oh, you're such a fraidy cat, Yeah, I am.
I had 75 gray dose of radiation. They measure GY, they call it gray, in my tongue for tongue cancer back in 2008. And I have suffered so many debilitating, what they call quality of life issues as a result of the radiation. And since I had it when I was so young, 50, I could actually end up with radiation-induced cancer down the line. So I can tell you right now that radiation is extremely harmful, and you don't want, the amount that I had compared to what could happen in a nuclear accident. I remember talking about when we were doing political actions, thinking of political actions to shut down San Onofre. I said, we should park our cars there or drive really slow to show what it would be like if you tried to evacuate 3 million people. It couldn't be done.
No.
And then, of course, they're burying the radiation in these casks like 100 feet from the ocean in a tsunami zone down there. What could go wrong?
Right.
And they're cooling, I don't know if now that you're telling me in Diablo Canyon, they use seawater. I don't know what they're using in San Onofre, but my understanding was that California is in a drought. And if they run out of water, I can't remember, I read some nuclear power plant, they had to turn it off because they weren't generating enough fresh water.
Well, also the water gets too hot. In France, they've repeatedly had to shut reactors because they're on rivers and the rivers are too hot to cool the reactors. I mean, this is genius, I mean, Diablo does use seawater, but they keep talking. Diablo is up on cliffs, and they keep saying it's going to be safe from tsunamis. But the intake pipes are right on the ocean,
Right.
Small problem with a tsunami there. So every way they turn, if we now zero in on the specifics of the reactors, we can win reactor by reactor.
So anyway, getting back to my answer, what is the plan? I digress to talk about Granholm for a second, but what is the plan with Newsom?
We want people to write letters to Newsom himself, to send snail mails to him,
Okay.
actual letters. We have Prime Minister Khan sent a letter to Governor Newsom a week ago today, which he received a week ago today, urging him to stop with the Diablo Canyon push, and warning him about what he had experienced in Japan as a result of Fukushima. Let's see. So we
Well,
have
we did have a
petition.
we had a petition signed by the Hollywood, a lot of the Hollywood left, Jane Fonda, Lily Tomlin, Martin Sheen, Ed Asner, God love him, Graham Nash, Eric Roberts, and that's still around, but he ignored it. And all we asked for was an inspection, and they didn't do that. But I'm betting that there's going to be a tremendous amount of pressure from the solar industry. And we just got to remember this number. There's 1,500 people working at Diablo. There's 70,000 in wind and solar just in California. And those are good numbers for us.
Yeah.
So I think what we do is we go at the specifics of the reactor at Diablo, and we don't buy into this nuclear debate. It's not about nuclear power. It's about Diablo Canyon. And the realities are. The other thing is the workforce at Diablo. These guys they've got their retirement plans. A lot of these guys who are working at the plant are probably freaking out about the possibility of continue to operate. I mean, the agreement that was signed in 2016 had very, very generous pension plans and retirement programs and a lot of stuff like that.
Plus, they've been getting paid a 25% bonus per year as a retention inducement.
Right. There's no way that Diablo Canyon operating beyond 25 can compete with wind and solar in this state.
Right.
Not even close. They can't compete now. That's PG&E. It probably doesn't want it to continue. It would
and either can fracking, and that's why they're really trying to kill solar. They're trying to kill net metering in my new state, North Carolina, as well.
Well, probably the best strategy for shutting Diablo is to prevent the tax on solar, and to keep solar going onto rooftops. There's been the Biden administration has also really hurt solar with this tariff stuff, and they have not been smart at all about it, unless they're on the other side. So we'll see. Weirdly enough, Biden, when he lived in Delaware, lived right across the river from 3 reactors in New Jersey, and they freaked him out. And he's got some serious critiques of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and the industry in his, backlog of stuff. But he seems to have lost track of that. And, but the way we win is to prevent them from portraying nuclear power as this black box that automatically works. It's 92 reactors that are an average age of 39. And, and none of them, the youngest one in in Tennessee is 25. And all these reactors that are in operation were mostly designed in the pre-digital 1960s, for God's sakes. So that's how we win, is we go out at reactor, and none of them have numbers that can compete in any way, shape, or form. And then you raise the issue of the cooling. It's not, they do use the ocean water at Diablo, but at Palo Verde, which is 10% owned by the LADWP, uses sewage water. And there is no way they can sustain cooling that reactor. There's 3 reactors there. It's the biggest reactor site in the country. They can't sustain cooling that thing. There's no way. So there are all sorts of individuated problems, reactor by reactor. Nobody thinks of this, but there are a number of reactors, including the 3 at Oconee in South Carolina, that are downstream from dams. And if you have a dam that breaks above a nuclear plant, you're going to have a tsunami, basically. And what happened at Fukushima could happen at Oconee, for God's sakes. So,
I want to remind people who are watching this that Fukushima happened 11 years ago in March. They still have 3 reactors that are melting they cannot get to the melted core of those reactors. Every time they try to send a robot in, the robot melts. They are using hundreds and millions and billions of tons of water every day to keep the reactors from blowing sky high. 11 years later, and they have no idea of what they're going to do with that stuff. I mean, who on earth would want to put money or their effort or time or their children's future into some kind of proposition that could end up like that, even if there were a 1/1,000,000th of a chance of it happening? It's not worth it.
Especially when the cost of wind and solar has come down.
Right.
And it's so plentiful. Now, I guess the issue with that is battery storage, because they say that, when you need it, it's at night, you don't have it. And we've got to depend on that man that we don't like.
Right. Battery storage is supposed to be in 2023 is the targeted date for California to have enough battery storage to mend that gap between solar, with the solar and wind and hydro and geothermal. All of those resources combined that's the key, is that battery storage, which should be addressed by next year.
Yeah. And there's a big other technology they're pushing, which I probably can do a whole show on, hydrogen, that I was just informed on why that's so bad. But I'm going to look up what this woman told me. But while I do that, I'm going to put this question from our viewer, Dina Inglesrud, who is very active in the California Democratic Party. What does Linda think about their dangerous idea they're floating around about turning it into a nuclear waste storage facility like the place in Nevada? Does she think that idea is getting any real traction?
Absolutely not. You mean turning Diablo Canyon into that?
Yeah, no. I guess she's thinking about like Yucca Mountain or something, right?
She was thinking about Yucca Mountain, but replacing Yucca Mountain with Diablo Canyon, no, couldn't. Absolutely never could happen. It's on 13 earthquake faults. They couldn't get a license for that if they were God.
Yeah.
I've been in Yucca Mountain. I took a tour of Yucca Mountain, and it was very interesting because you can actually see the fault lines in I went in with a geologist, they're right there. They go running right through the place, and there's perched water. I mean, Yucca Mountain's insane. It's a volcano, for God's sakes, so what are they thinking there? But I'm an optimist. I think we're going to win. I don't think Diablo Canyon is going to continue, not because of a debate between nuclear and solar, because of the pedestrian issues at Diablo itself, which are overwhelming.
I want to make one quick comment about 4 months ago or so. The Office of the Inspector General of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission did an investigation of their own NRC inspector at Diablo Canyon, who they discovered a pipe in the non-nuclear side, but a big pipe where there was a joint that had been leaking for God knows how long. It had all kinds of moss and goo and stuff all over it. And the inspector, the NRC inspector, checked this thing off on his checklist like it was okay. And then somebody in the plant notified the OIG and said, hey, there's something bad here. And the OIG made a finding against the resident inspector for being negligent. So that gave us a lot. That was, even though the inspector was negligent, they have cleaned up their act an awful lot now, because they don't want to be called negligent anymore. And so it came at a really good time for us.
I think you can reasonably,
for the world. What?
Right. I think you can reasonably expect some whistleblowers to start coming out of Diablo. I'll bet you there's a lot of people working at Diablo who really, really do not want that thing to continue.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
Linda, you got to go hang around the bars. That's how they put it in the China syndrome. Remember, they would
Anyway, what?
hang
No.
around where the workers went after work and got them talking. But I wanted to read this thing about hydrogen because my friend Andrea Leon Grossman, who works for Azul, which is a foremost agency, NGO in California that protects our water. She used to work for Food and Water Watch. That's where I met her. She writes, as far as hydrogen, 95% of all hydrogen is made from fossil fuels in the US. But even green hydrogen made from renewables has many drawbacks. You need to source it with electrolysis by breaking water molecules, separating hydrogen from oxygen. So you need a big body of water. In LA, we have a drought, so most likely it means they will push for desalination, which is not one very energy intensive, but it kills a massive amount of fish and plankton and has lots of concentrated brine as waste. Then to store hydrogen, you have to convert it to ammonia. Both hydrogen and ammonia are very explosive and dangerous. There is no reason to trust LADWP or SoCalGas with something so dangerous. Besides leaks, which can increase NOx emissions, we can have a Beirut-style explosion. SoCalGas wants to store this dangerous fuel in Aliso Canyon and Playa del Rey. And as
hydrogen,
my viewers know, they have been trying to shut down Aliso Canyon ever since the largest methane leak in U.S. history. And we protested that. And I will say that Andrea was very successful in stopping the Poseidon desalination effort. And one more thing that I want to mention that I've heard from her is this Rick Zabur, who is the heir apparent to Richard Bloom in that Santa Monica State Assembly District, is terrible. He worked for Latham and Watkins and got the first desal plant approved down in Orange County. He's also a YIMBY, which is yes in my backyard, supported by those real estate developers that has no affordable housing, but they try to, greenwash you into thinking that it's environmental and it is affordable. And the other thing that he's very pro APAC. So anybody watching in his district should not think that he is the good candidate. But I digress. Harvey, you were going to say.
Sorry about that. Yes. I mean, I in 2007, I got a grant to write a book about the coming hydrogen economy, which was all the rage at the time. And I started to write the book, and I went back to the guys and said, look, man, this isn't going to happen. There's no sense in hydrogen. Any hydrogen you make can equally be made into electricity, which is, much more usable. There's a whole litany of problems with hydrogen. Electricity is just fine, especially now with batteries. And we're sitting on the two most important breakthroughs or power sources that can carry us for the rest of the century, which are rooftop solar and offshore wind. And between the two of them, there's more than enough electricity production to power the United States essentially forever. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Well, offshore wind is absolutely enormous. There are slight problems, but nothing, the environmental problems with offshore wind, I'm sure some unexpected ones will turn up. We do have the bird issue, but nothing like the opponents want to say it is. And with rooftop solar, you don't have transmission costs and a whole litany of other great attributes. If you add in battery storage, which nobody really counted on, it came on really strong batteries. And then the real short-term miracle has been LED lighting. I mean, LED lighting has transformed the electrical situation. So with all this going on, nuclear is just got a hole in the bottom of that boat. Hydrogen is a diversion. Small reactors. Let's ask a question. In Ukraine, you've got 15 reactors that have been taken over by the Russians. So you got Putin with 6 right there, Zaporozhye, along the border. Then there's 3 other sites with 9 other reactors. And then you have Chernobyl. I mean, one of the most amazing things that happened in the Ukraine war is that the Russian troops, because of geography, marched through Chernobyl and they set up shop there and they realized how radioactive it was and they abandoned the place. They got the hell out of there.
Yeah.
You know, it's outrageous what happened at Chernobyl. So
Well,
the Ukraine war has underscored the fact these guys are talking about hundreds of small reactors. How do you protect them? It would take two guys, two people with little bombs to blow up a small reactor. Come on, I mean it's insane. So, we have all the answers. They're very, very clear. We have wave after wave after wave of the nuclear renaissance and carbon free and all this garbage, and eventually it just washes away, and we're left with the hard economic realities that solar, wind, batteries, and LED efficiency work. They're economical. They're job creating. You have 800,000 people now in this country in those industries.
okay, Harvey, we got to wrap it up because we reached the end of our hour. I want to post your Twitter handle here. I don't know how actively you tweet.
I've just learned my password, so I think I can use it actually, so people can tweet me. And my email, which I use more, is solartopia@me.com.
And this is Linda Seeley. I don't know if you tweet, but this is your Twitter handle here.
That is, yeah. I do, kind of.
And Harvey, I just want to say that, people don't know this, but Harvey put on one hell of a concert back in 1979 in Battery Park. I was there.
Really?
The No Nukes concert. Absolutely, I was there. I'll never forget it. Jackson Browne, Bonnie Raitt. Who else was there, Harvey?
Well, Bruce Springsteen. I didn't put it on alone, believe me. All I did was talk about nuclear at the press conferences. But Jackson, Bonnie, CSN, James Taylor, Carly Simon, Chaka Khan, Peter Tosh. It was fun, and I actually remember it.
You got to do a new one. You got to do a new one, Harvey, for solar and wind in California. There's a whole new generation of musical artists, and probably a lot of those old ones too that would come back.
Absolutely.
So I want to thank you both for joining me tonight to talk about this very important subject. Viewers, you know what to do. Sign that petition to Jerry Brown. Write him a letter at that link. Write letters to your editors of your local papers if you still have local papers. And, we're going to shut this thing down, and then we're going to be done with nuclear power in California.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Well, you're great.
And have a great night, everyone. Share the show.
Take care.
Okay.